Your friend made it known to me, subjoined to the urgent request that I might outline for you the regulatory rules of the logical arts gathered together into a single unified text, and transmit them directly into your attention. For the mind of a true lover of wisdom is never satisfied unless it is nourished by the actual fruits of the results, rather than empty debates. Therefore, out of this introductory concept, those things that are useful and the necessary for the studious advancement of the higher sciences and to be extracted and firmly grasped. Logic is the science of sciences and the art of arts, and which opens the way to the principle of all methods. For just as the mechanical instrument is useless in the hands of the craftsman who lacks knowledge of its proper application, so too is all the other sciences that remain dark and neglected without illuminating the light of logic. Therefore, logic is to embrace by all who desire to approach the peak of wisdom with these primary elements. It follows no trace to the first rules of the definitions, demonstrating how the human mind advances from the simple recognition of a voice or a sound into the formal construction of the internal proposition. If anyone should be objected into these rules that are basic, let them, and understand them without the entire building of philosophy collapsing. Regarding the definition of the concept, it is the innate intent or the likeness formed in the soul that signifies the external reality. This concept can be simple or complex. A simple concept signifies a single nature, and when a complex concept signifies a union of properties, nothing can be predicted of subject unless it is first held with the intellect under one of these formal conditions. Furthermore, we must distinguish between our vocal signs and our mental signs. The spoken words are merely indicators for the use of communication into the internal concept into another mind. If the vocal sign does not align with the true mental concept, falsehood and error enter into the argument. Therefore, the philosopher must guard the relationship between the speech and understand with it maximum care. Finally, we must then recognize from the order of the predicaments the sciences that organize all things, until the ten supreme genera descending rectilinearly the individual instances by matching your physical drawings into these categorical divisions. The supplement of the systematic whole into the natural philosophy is made evidently clear to the student. Thus concludes the introduction to the first chapter. And there are some big words in this. I have to say that I might get smacked around a couple times, but it's all in the good favor. So bear with me. Since it is our intention to trace the first elements of the logical arts, it is necessary to begin by defining the primary components, namely the terms. A term cannot be understood in threefold manner: as written, as spoken, and conceived into the mind. A written term is part of the proposition recorded on the physical surface, which is visible into the bodily eye. A spoken term is a vocal sign uttered by their mouth, and which is perceived by the sense of hearing. A conceived term is the intent or the likeness that is naturally formed into the soul, which signifies an external reality without being spoken or written. It is called mental term or conceptual sign. Because of this, it must be understood that the spoken words are merely indicators or secondary signs used to communicate these primary mental concepts. And to another human mind, therefore, if spoken or written signs do not accurately align and with the true internal concept of the soul, the resulting proposition introduces falsehood, and logical rectitude is utterly destroyed. So somebody can pretend to be you as much as they want, but at the end of it all, they're going to run into an absolute brick wall. Look what happened to the actor that played the Joker in Batman, the last one. What happened to him outside of the movie skit? He played the Joker so well that he forgot who he was. And he ran into a wall full speed. So that's why you stand in what you're passionate about. Because the second you let go of your passions, you're standing in falsehood. And that's when you turn in, like, the livelihood, the experience should not be dull. It should not be monotonous. It should always be you wake up and boom, you're doing what you love. Just because you love it. You shouldn't have to go and do something because you're forced to do it because you need some materialistic gain that's loss of sense of self. I'm not saying that the material doesn't matter. I'm saying that you matter more than the material. It doesn't go with you. Your happiness is everything. Furthermore, we must recognize into some terms that are absolute, while others are purely relative and connotative. In the absolute term, that signifies the underlying objective, that directly into the essential, such as man or stone. A relative term, conversely, points in towards its object through the accidental relationship or the arrangement of the order, looking in towards another thing ad aliquid. And this is our logic. It teaches us to step cautiously with a partitioning subjects, distinguishing what is in the universal and from what is merely an accidental. It was an accidental for me to go and slave my 16-hour days away and have like minimum an hour to myself. It's distinguished that I'm gonna go to school and choose a job where I'm not busting up my knee capillaries and my elbow capillaries working super duper hard when everyone's capable of infinity. That don't make no sense. Why limit the self when the self is limitless? Regarding the composition of these terms, the grammarians, the logicians, treat them under the completely different operational frameworks. The grammarian considers the vocal sounds as part of speech in terms of their congruence and proper construction in language. The logician, however, considers the term under the aspect of the truth and the value of the capacity of the sign as the real existence of the proposition. And for this reason, a phrase can be grammatically perfect yet logically empty if it lacks true conceptual reference. Uh, um, what? All of those are filler words. That's the brain stuttering. You should be so finely attuned that you never stutter. There should be never a stutter in your day to day. But what happens? We've turned life from living into surviving. Now we're surviving when we should be thriving. Knowledge is in abundance. The second we take anything out of the abundance that we're gifted, then we fall short of understanding ourselves in the highest sense of self. And this is where spirituality comes into play. If you want to live your best life ever, spirituality comes first. That's your highest sense of self. If you put that on the back burner, now you got all this fugazi stuff that just makes absolutely no sense to boggle your mind over. You should never be chopped up. So there's this thing where it says, based off of the level of the decision that you're supposed to make, is the amount of time you're supposed to spend on it. So say you're going to the store, you're going to go buy a bag of popcorn. Now you're standing in the popcorn aisle and you're spending 30 minutes looking at the different bags of popcorn because there's so many different options. That's the absolute loss of intellect. You're supposed to go for the bag of popcorn, get the bag of popcorn, go and sit and watch a movie, enjoy your bag of popcorn in the movie. But what happens? We get stuck in these stutter phases. And then at the end of the stutter phases, we're like, oh, I don't have enough time in the day to focus on myself. Bro, you don't just spend 30 minutes in a popcorn aisle looking at popcorn when you didn't know which one to pick when they all pop the same. My goodness. I don't know if that was a good choice of an analogy, but it's the best way I could put it. The intellect remains in a single simple substance, and even when it forms or holds a complex chain of the logical concept, just as the physical seal stamps an expression onto wax without altering the baseline of the natural nature of the wax itself, so the external world stamp formal in likeness directly onto the common sense wherein are then pass rectilinearly into the memory. So that's your day-to-day habits. What you do every single day. If you wake up and you look in the mirror and you brush your teeth and you say, I'm an amazing person, I'm going to have an amazing day, you're manifesting the reality. But if you wake up and you say, oh, it's Monday, dude, you set your day. You truly just set your day. You got to stop doing that. So, and you take that in the literal sense and you apply it everywhere. Everything should be fun. Going and planting your feet on the grass and reading a book, that should be fun. But we've taken everything so far out of context that we think we need to be skiing down the Appalachian Mountains in the middle of winter, hitting the slopes 24/7. Like, yeah, adrenaline's fun. Yeah, all of this other stuff that is external of us is amazing. But what about the self? That matters more, doesn't it? And this is why I like to come to this conclusion where it's like, it's cool to chase after this secondary, whatever the secondary is to you, but have you taken a second to focus on yourself and ask yourself, like, where am I going? What am I doing? What am I passionate about? I think the most bogged down statement you could ever run into, you ask somebody what they're passionate about, and they go, did you know there was this? It's like, what? What? What do you have to load on what you're passionate about? There's no way. Ain't no gosh darn way. Finally, out of these required rules and the certain things that are explicitly excluded, a term that contains the contradictions into within the definition cannot properly be placed in a direct line with the predicament, nor can it serve or build a proper syllogistic proof. It is to exist only as an object of thought, the completely fictitious entity falling to the corresponding to any true physical nature. Thus, and through these primary definitions, the path is cleared for the study of the second and the third operations of the mind. That's the Holy Trinity, the three different operations of the mind. And so, when you're praying, you're supposed to pray to the Trinity. You're praying to the higher sense of self. I just read it in the first book of John, in this old ancient manuscript. They were praying to the Trinity. I was like, hold on, what did that just say? They're praying to the light. And so in the first book of John, John's actually getting cooked in a kiln. They have him in a little broiler pot. They're going to eat him. And when they turn up the heat on the broiler pot, that John doesn't cook. He's chilling in the hot tub. And they're like, oh my gosh, he must be. And it's like, you just did what to a human being? You put him in a bottle of boiling water? Wow, and then you pray to this light? Wow, what a time to be alive. At least we're not back there, huh? Woo, good times, huh? These old books are awesome, I have to say. Therefore, it is stated in the logical term when considered into the absolute rectitude and to operate under the distinct categorical guidelines. Every true proposition requires that which is subject into the predicate to possess a clear, unmixed signification of reality, and for out of these primary divisions the student of wisdom must gather the specific conditions of a name or a sign. Its name signifies that the ambiguously to the logic of the argument that breaks down and the falsehood that enters the conclusion. Following these parameters, we must to obtain a distinction between the common terms and the singular terms. A singular term which is suited into its nature to signify one unique individual thing and nothing else, such as Socrates or Plato. A common term, conversely, that is what is inherent to, suited by the predicament of the many things throughout the universal distribution, such as man or animal. It is for these common terms that the universal sciences derive their stable laws of the principles. So I think Socrates was the loose end as far as the knowledge, and I think that Plato was the thief of the knowledge and that he sold it. And then, but what happened is I think Socrates got banned from this higher sense of school because they gatekept knowledge. They were like, you can't give away our secrets. And it's like, bro, this is universal knowledge. This is the study of the universe. Like, I can't claim this. And so I think there was a lesser grade of selling it rather than giving it away. But they twist the story to make their actions pliable to the universe. So what really happened, I think if you want to pay attention super deep, is that you have Apollinia. Apollinia is going to be Apolliana, which is the original Socrates. And it talks about he was making the first Pythagorean theorem. And it's like, bro, we got told this was Pythagoras. Man, they better make up their story, bro. It's Socrates, Jesus, Apollonius. I can't. That's 4 different people with one alias. Unless there's copycats. No, but the copycat was Plato, because Plato copied it all down. And he turned the oral knowledge into written knowledge. And that's why Plato has so many amazing works. But also they took the universalness from it, the light, and they turned it into a being. So it strips the power from the people still. And then they made it subjective to women, better that men are better than women. They subjectified it, which also big no. Everything in this earth screams mother, women. And without women, no earth. I know on my other page I just dropped how the number 11 stands for the twin, the twain, your divine counterpart. Without your divine counterpart, you are nothing in this universe. And the experience is going to be monotony. What's gotten into me? The twain is like your ultimate goal to chase after. So if the person don't match you, you better get ready to skull drag at least 100 yards because you're going to be friction towards each other. One of you likes to watch TV. One of you likes to go skydiving. One of you won't jump out of a plane. What's going to happen when you try to go skydiving every weekend? Friction, right? It is from these common terms that the universal sciences that derive into their stable laws and principles. Thus concludes the general induction to the division of the absolute signs. It follows now to treat the concerning specific nature of the mental terms as the distinct vocal designations, and for within our doctrine which teaches us the distinguished interior architect of the mind from the spoken utterance of the mouth. Your thoughts manifest your reality, my family. Don't take that lightly. Your thoughts, your spoken words, you are programming your projection system in like a holistic way. Like, I'm not saying you're actually turning the world into some sort of simulation like the Matrix, but you're kind of very powerful and you got to quit pretending you're not. So regarding this matter, a division is made between the mental concepts and the vocal sounds that is uttered. So if you use something like a shameful word, I don't like it, but I'm going to say it. I'm sorry. That's a shameful word. What are you sorry for? You're human. You're here. You're living. My bad, I'm human. That's a way better form of expression. My bad, I'm human. My bad. Don't say it with all that slang, but do it in a nature where it's not that word. There should be no shame in your day-to-day life. If somebody's taking something you've done too serious, you gotta buckle up because I ain't your doormat. You understand me? I'm being kind and courteous. My bad. Accept it. But don't use the other word. A mental concept is a single unified intent or the likeness which is naturally formed of the soul, which signifies the external objects without the intermediate sign. It is a natural sign possessing the same meaning for all human minds, whether they speak Latin, Greek, or another tongue. A vocal term, conversely, is to be the conventional sign instituted by the human choice to signify the internal concept. Because a vocal term is the conventional creation, it can change or be altered by human customs over time without changing the baseline of the nature of the mental concept itself. That's where we get slang. Slang goes all the way across all categories of languages. For example, the spoken word man differs from the different languages, yet into the internal mental concept it remains identical in every intellect. Therefore, the philosopher must guard this relationship carefully and understand the spoken words are merely secondary notes used to communicate the primary operations through the soul to another. For this reason, we must next examine the division of the terms and the discrete predicaments and the classifications of the sciences of the logic that organizes all common terms into 10 supreme genera, descending rectilinearly from the highest genius down and through the specific differences until it reaches the individual instances. By matching your own physical tracks into these exact structural divisions, the complete systematic whole of a logical prediction is made evident. Thus begins the analysis of the universal categories. Following the structural rules and the established previously, the intellect must observe in how common terms divide themselves under the various conditions. The first sign does not know how to possess the capacity to signify unless it falls cleanly under the establishment of the grammatical or logical boundary. And wherein these terms are used in a proposition must be examined and so they are to their absolute proprietaries and to never mix with an accidental mode of speech. If anyone should ever ignore these rules, they will introduce confusion to the division of the universal categories. There's a time to cry, there's a time to pry, and there's a time to preach. You gotta know when there's the appropriate time for all of them. Cheers to that. My goodness, I'm about to just take my beard off, bro. Regarding this matter, the major distinction must recognize between the terms that signify the essence directly and those that might merely be a sign of the relation and the circumstance for the reason. A true physical body contains its own internal principles, in which natural philosophy handles according to the material conditions. The realm of logic, however, we use looks at these concepts as predicated. Therefore, the mind must step cautiously in the partitioning in what is the absolute from the connotative, so that the line of the reasoning remains unbroken from its source to its ultimate term. All your words have meaning. You ain't just gonna walk up and pump somebody up when they're destroying the world. You're gonna go, hey, you're kind of a bad person. Those words have meaning. You're supposed to be a self-governing system. You're not gonna do it in a stylistic way where it's like my opinion matters more than yours. But no, you shouldn't degrade people like that. That's a little bit not okay. But hey, what if we go about it in a different way too? So, you know how everyone likes to take offense to it? Agree with them? Say, yeah, that's where my family comes from, but I chose this way. Boom. You said, you agreed, and you're not destroying the user, so you're diffusing the situation. I've been there, I've done that, my family was that way, but I'm going to be the difference. And you're setting a little pebble in their garden of rocks. So don't ever seek debates that get heated. Don't ever seek to prove yourself right in a world full of right people. Because what Beyonce say? Everything you own in the box to the left. No, I'm just joking. But hold on. Let me focus. Thus concludes the initial inquiry of the general nature of the names of the singular significations. It follows not to treat the concerning supreme divisions of all the terms that are used and to build the propositions, whether they are to exist naturally in the mind, are conventionally instituted by the human choice. Everybody got choices. E40 said it. Ugh. You mean? Let me focus. My bad. Regarding the term that signifies whether they are the natural signs in the soul or the conventional signs uttered by the mouth. A primary division is made by some terms that are the categormatic and that are the sign categormatic. My goodness. Some syntax right there. Wow. A categormatic term is that which possesses the definitive, the certain, the fixed signification of its own, and such are these words: man, animal, or stone. It can function directly as the true subject of the predicate or of a proposition pointing to a real entity of the world without requiring the intermediate sign. Whoa, brother, I just got hit with the flashbang. A sign categormatic term, conversely, is that which and does not possess the primary or the inter. Ooh, that was quite the flashbang. Independent signification, and when taken entirely by itself into the worlds, are all, none, some, except, or if. These terms do not signify real things or substances into the external world. They're the filler world. They're the filler words. My goodness, bro. Instead, their entire logical function is to modify, distribute, or vary the manner in which the categormatic terms signify the given proposition. And for the instance, and when the world is to all and to join to man, it does not point into a new entity, but distributes the concept of the humanity across the every individual instances. Therefore, these two classes are termed which possess the fundamentally different operational frameworks, and when the cognitive reasoning into the categorematic terms. Hey, I'm loving this terminology. My bad. I have to appreciate it real quick. Delicious. Provide the material substance of the arguments in the synagrammatic terms, and with the terms to provide the formal logic, the architecture which binds them together, and without this formal binding, a chain of words can never to achieve true or falsehood, nor can it serve to construct a valid syllogistic proof. Thus begins in the detailed analysis into the functional logic. I might botch a couple sentences, but it's all I'm breaking them down as best as I can. And my bad, I got hit by the flashbang effect, where when you stumble upon something new and it like resonates with you and it goes ping, and you're like, ow, my ear, dude. That was potent. That was a potent word. Two potent words. I'm adding to my vocab box. I've been reading so many books lately that my left eye's starting to fester up. And I try to stop, and I'm like, but what about the next books? What's in the next books? I'm so excited because they're like little Christmas presents. Little Christmas presents of knowledge. It's like Christmas every day, bro. I'm like, yay, Christmas, let's go. And I know that I take things out of context sometimes, so I'm back. Following these distinctions into its clear synagrammatic signs carry no independent reference unless they are to be joined into the true categorematic subjects. The logician and two must analyze the structure of the proposition, that is, the quantity of the distribution that are mathematically proportioned into the real object being signified. So if you run into an awesome person and you're like, hey, you cool, but the person's awesome, you're telling the person they're awesome you're telling them they're cool when they're awesome. And you're not even giving them the full backstory. You're not even giving the definition behind why you think they're awesome. You're being surface level. But now if you say, hey, you're awesome because you have such a great form of teaching that's full of soul, and your whole charisma is magnificent. You might have overdid the flattering words, but you went above the call of duty to signify that they're beyond cool. And that's what we need. We need more in-depth than surface. Surface is anybody can draw on a piece of paper with crayons. Where's the fun in that? There ain't no fun in that. Now you take the same idea in the brain cycle from your little sleep realm and you bring it forth with all sorts of paints, markers, pens, and kaboom! You brought forth the wholeness of what it should be versus the crayon drawing. Never try to draw with a crayon on somebody else. If you're gonna tell somebody they're cool, you might as well just go jump in a pool and see how long you can hold your breath in the deep end. You mean? How they align with the physical realities. I use that reference because when I was a lifeguard, I was with a bunch of Marines, and I would go and hold my breath for as long as possible in the deep end of the pool. And they never understood why I found fun in it. And I was like, because it gets me away from you grunt, unworthy to talk to people. They always created a competition out of nothing. And I was like, bro, do you not see how empty it is to continuously compete between each other? No, let me just go check out the deep end of the pool real quick. I do bottom samples for so long. When I come back up, one time he was like, what are you doing? I was like, enjoying my life? What are you doing? It doesn't make sense why you keep doing that. You need to stop. I'm enjoying my life, brother. You should try it out. Oh gosh. I didn't do too well in the military. You're supposed to conform, you're supposed to fit in, you're supposed to march in line. Nah. In a natural philosophy, the material body is defined by the internal principle of the motion. and rest into the subject to the conditions of the change in logic. However, we must strip away these physical alterations to look at how the properties are predicted into the subject. Therefore, the mind must into these abstract terms into their universality, separating what is to the essential subject and from what is merely contingent or accidental property. I might read this back a couple times. Oh my gosh. Delicious. Ooh, you ain't found a book like this in 2,000 years. Thus concludes the initial inquiry of the functional boundaries and the syntax of the modifications. It follows and to treat the concerning primary linguistics to the building blocks that receive these synochromatic operations with the true proposition, whether they are natural, and to conceive the conventionally and to written down. Thus into the fourth chapter we begin. Thus ends the fourth chapter. We're on chapter 5 already. Look at us go. I think a chapter was a paragraph. They were doing run-on sentences back in the day, dang near. You know, I got in trouble when I went to high school because Mr. Burke, he... I did run-on sentences. I didn't put periods. And I kept coming up to him. I gave him one paper full of words. He was like, all right, this is one paragraph. Come back to me when you're done. I brought him back 2 papers full of words. He was like, all right, this is one paragraph. Come back to me when you're done. I was like, this, bro, if I have to continue to... I come back with 5 pieces of paper full of words. He's like, very good. This is one paragraph. Come back to me. Bro, I almost flipped the desk, bro. I was like, what is this guy getting at, bro? What am I messing up? And then like 2 months later, after almost failing English, I go, oh, you just have to put a period and separate. Wow. I was like, forget I ever came up to you with 10 different stacks of paper. Let me just put some periods and space this out a little bit. He's like, all right, come back when you're done. Brother, this is how they used to talk. So I was clearly just remembering something prehistoric on accident. Now, I honestly didn't get along in these classes ever. Not once, never. I got kicked out of every single class with every single teacher in every single grade. I got to the point of one time where in first grade, I stormed out of the classroom after shooting the teacher on accident with a crayon tip. I was just playing with the crayons, bro. You break the little crayon tips off, you slingshot it with the little crayon box, you let go, and you never know where it's going to go, but it went pting, 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 and smacks the teacher in the face, and I was like, and she kicks me out, and I was like, bro, I'm in hillbilly hell. I said that in first grade when I was a little younger, a little young, and can you imagine once I got older? I also ran away from school like 15 times in like kindergarten, and every time my mom was like, what are you doing? I was like, they're trying to tell me how I need to act. You know, one time when I was a kid, my mom was like, yeah, we all pass away sometimes. And I tried to wrap my mind around it. I was like, we pass away? Where do we go after that? And she said, we just go back into heaven. I said, no. What's after that? And she's like, you go and you enjoy the after. And I was like, no, Mom. Like, what do you mean you pass away? Can you explain this to me? And she explains it to me, bro. I broke down for like 2 weeks straight. I was like, we pass away? I can't believe this. So sometimes we got to be more down to earth because some people just can't understand certain stuff. And here we are understanding much further bound stuff with zero resistance because it took to achieve that age of maturity where we're like, all right, we're just quantum observers. We're just here to enjoy the show. Let's go. What's next? Let's make this movie an absolute ball. Because it belongs into the proper, the noun and the verb, that acts as a sign to the name, the essential subject and the predicate and the proposition, we must now and to discuss their specific logical definitions. First, by beginning with the noun is defined as a significant vocal or mental term that signifies the meaning into the entirety of the independent of the time, no separate part of which signifies anything on its own, and which exists as a finite nominative case. Bro, if you read that definition for noun in elementary, you would have broke down. You would have been like, what? The baseline definition of a noun excludes the verbs and completes the complex phrases from its direct classification. Yeah, you would have ran into the wall. A verb is excluded because it is inherently signifying the alongside specific terminal marker or the tense. The complex phrase of the sentence excluded because it is separate into the parts that carry the independent meanings of their own. Therefore, a true logical noun exclusive verbs in the complex phrases, and from its direct classification, a verb excluding because it is inherently different from alongside a specific temporal marker or a sense. A complex phrase or the sentence is excluded because it separates the parts as the independent meanings of their own. Therefore, a true logical noun must be simple into the non-temporal unit of the meaning that stands into directly of a concept or entity with a categorical statement. Finally, out of these required properties, we must recognize the boundary between the finite and infinite. I gotta quit emphasizing the F on that. Infinite nouns. In the infinite noun, such as the non-man, fails to be placed into a distinct positive boundary with the predicament. It points into everything as the universe except for the specific subject name. See, this is where philosophy is absolutely far out. You are no different than the absolute universe that is outside of the ionosphere. And I keep reiterating the absoluteness to it because how cool that you're just as cool. I don't mean to say cool because I just use that as a reference, but how awesome is it to exist in this total state of unity of this all? Like, this is the cosmic dream come true to experience. Yeah, we fall a couple times, but you put a band-aid on, you get up a little bit later, you're healed. You're better. You're ready for the next drill. And what fun would football be if everyone just like ran the opposite way with the ball? It wouldn't be fun at all. There's no contact to that. And I'm hoping maybe in my near future, when I go to the university, that I get to play college football. How cool would that be? They're gonna be like, "You're too nerdy." I'm gonna be like, give me the ball. Let me show you something." I'm an absolute monster. But I'll never get back into the enhancing side of any sport. So consequently, it cannot serve to build a proper rectilinear line of the descent and with the universal categories, but it exists as a negative boundary. Thus begins the detailed analysis of the nouns, the verbal, the significations, nouns and verbal significations. Regarding these matters, the clear division must be recognized between the absolute designation and for those terms that carry the intrinsic reference to time. For a noun that signifies its underlying object completely into the temporal boundaries, a verb conversely cannot exist as a proposition without the introduction of a specific tense or temporal modification. Therefore, the mind must observe how the verbs in the alter of the distribution of the subject, ensuring that the formal quantity of the argument matches the reality of the being signified into the external world. This is why I like to think there's no such thing as a point of zero. If you are time and space is you, and you're like intermingled within the two, you're kind of just like in the middle of the most holistic experience, but there's no real state of zero, because that would be to point to one part of the universe and say, that's zero. That's not zero. The universe is vast. You are vast. There is no limitations to you. Why do we limit it? I don't know, man. This is why philosophy is dangerous. Because you can get so delved into philosophy that the common mind will listen to you talking. You'll be like, what is this dude talking about? But the philosophers talk like this to everybody. They loved it. So this is where philosophy comes from, is like the study of the outer and the inner, and that you are the highest source of creation. Here for the experience. There's no true value to you unless you value you. And what's your value you set? It should be infinite. You should be under this understanding that you are the best living thing here on Mother Earth to experience the experience. Nothing should ever take that out of context where, oh, I'm better than the next. It's not like that. It's, oh, we are all one family under the same terms and agreements. Chase your dreams and don't stop at, I'm just going to be a mechanic. Don't stop at, I'm just going to be a wind turbine technician. Don't stop nowhere. Try it out. Love your life and live the dream based off of what you believe the dream to be. That was good. Pat on the back for that one. Furthermore, we distinguish between the principle, the verbal, the copula, and these verbs that signify action or passion directly. The principle, copula, namely the verb is est. And see, we change it. Never mind. Serves into the sole function of the joining of the subject to the predicate. It does not introduce a new entity or substance into the proposition, but establishes a formal, existential relation between the two concepts. If a verb signifies the action, such as runs or writes, it contains both the copulative function and the specific connotative quality that modifies the subject under the particular temporal conditions. I didn't pre-read this, by the way. I'm full sending this because why hold back anything from sharing? Sharing is like the holistic sense of our experience here on Earth. Now, you can't share with everybody. Let me tell you that. Because some people they'll try and spike you in the foot, put you in a little pot, call you John the Baptist, and say you're not allowed in my town no more. And then you get kicked out of Rome after they try to cook you in a pot. Get out of here, all right? And then you go and write a book or something. Whatever. I'll go enjoy myself. I don't need nobody but myself to party. Feel me? Thus, in conclusion to the initial inquiry into the foundational structure of the verbal significations and temporal modifications, it follows now to treat the concerning to the strict division of verbs, and to the discrete tenses and the modalities, demonstrating how they alter the true value of the statement across the past, present, and the future. Note carefully that a verb is defined as a significant vocal or mental term that carries its meaning alongside with a specific temporal marker, no separate part of which signifies anything on its own, and which is to serve the determined predicate as a proposition. This temporal aspect is twofold, one that relates into the actual, present moment of the utterance, and the other relates into the conceptual, the duration of the state being described, and for this reason it is a statement too concerning that the past can logically be true even if the physical object no longer exists in actual reality. And that's where the allegories stay to stand and live another day. And that's why it's universal knowledge. That's why it's not to be gatekept. It's why everybody needs to come together under this higher sense of understanding that we're supposed to help each other, understand, grow, be better. We're not supposed to put people in little boxes. That's the opposite. Because the verb alters the logical scope of the proposition, the logician must need to apply these rules with the maximum caution, evaluating the syllogism. And when a verb shifts into the past and the future tense, it amplifies, ampliat, or limits the subject, allowing it to stand not only for the present existing things, but for the things that were once were or have meant to potentially to be. For example, when it is said a white thing was black, the subject and the distributed now across this past state of existence requiring a precise tracking of its historical accidents. Wow, that's deep. Finally, out of these required rules, certain expressions are explicitly excluded. Excuse me. Somebody got me on this coffee kick, and I can't kick it. I don't want to kick it because it's so good. No. True. A verb that introduces the contradiction in the terms, the modality that violates its necessary laws of nature, cannot properly to serve a construct valid proposition. It fails to establish a true relation between the subject and the predicate, which rendering into the entire discourse is logically empty. Thus begins the detailed structural analysis of the tense modality and the logical predication. Yo, this is so much fun that I'm having too much of a blast over here. My brain is being fed an absolute Rubik's Cube of words. Regarding these matters and to the let me go back. Regarding these matters, the intellect must observe how the individual terms harmonizes to create a unified assertion. And for a singular noun to isolate a verb is to be taken completely on its own. It cannot satisfy the requirement of the truth or the falsehood. Just as a physical craftsman must join into the separate pieces of the timber and to erect a stable structure, so the logician must skillfully link a categorimatic group of words under proper grammatical guidelines. If anyone should ignore these compounding rules, the stability of the entire discourse collapses into uncoordinated fragments. Bro, they did not take literature lightly back in the day, huh? Furthermore, we must recognize how externally into the reality acts into the ultimate measure and for our assertions. In natural philosophy, the philosopher state the physical substance is subject to the motion and localized change. That's why they explain the body in such strange ways. They're like the bone is made up of the dirt of the earth, and it is put in a kiln at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit and turned into the calcified what we have today. And so they're explaining the marrow process. The process how a bone starts from a marrow, turns into a bone, calcifies in the holistic state of the body being born. And if you talk like that, people are like, that's scientifically incorrect. But in the early Bibles, that's exactly how they explain being born. And they did it all backwards I also went over that this morning. Everything's been written backwards for you to go and fix it. If you go back, you can fix it. You could go back and you could change how they constructed the idea of the philosophy behind the structure of the human anatomy. You could reinstate it. You could make it a whole different statement. That's your ability. That's your universal law of the self. Bound by nothing here to self creates the most highest sense of creation based off of you are created from the Most High. Who created the universe created you. It's in your DNA. Therefore, the mind must step cautiously, partitioning into what is truly the essential statement from what is merely deceptive, the arrangement of words, ensuring that the vocal declaration is always going to mirror into the underlying conceptual rectitude of the soul. Thus concludes the detailed structural inquiry, separating from the primary parts of the speech, namely nouns, verbs, and synagrammatic modifications. It follows now to the treating and to the concerning and the formal joining of these elements and to the complete declarative statements that possess the definitive true value. Thus the ends of the 5th chapter. Chapter 6, a proposition, is defined as the congruent, a complete sentence or mental expression that signifies something true or false. It is the primary vehicle of the logical reasoning and no separate part of which the assertion is to completely judge into its own. For the instance, when a noun, man, is joined to the verbal copula, is, the predicate, rational, is the true proposition that is formed. It is these unified systems in the statements alone that universal sciences build their syllogisms and derive their eternal demonstrations. Because a proposition can exist in a threefold manner, namely the mental, conceived, vocally spoken, or physically written down, the philosopher must distinguish their proprieties and to the maximum care. A mental proposition is a natural sign for possessing an immutable truth of value that remains the identical across all human intellects. A vocal or written proposition, conversely, is a conventional creation that instituted by human choice, which can, in the very grammar, phrasing, and preserving the exact same core meaning in the soul. So it's soul food. We're converting anatomy of the human, which can be boring, absolutely skull drags, and we're converting it through the deepest understanding of the meaning into soul food, what we call now philosophy. Now we're philosophically speaking of the same thing with different states of words, getting to the same conclusive answer through the truth. We're just adding flavor to the text. Now pay attention to the philosophy. They go on forever about how everything is so amazing and this life we live is beyond our wildest comprehension, and it just sounds skull dragging to somebody who hasn't woken up to that highest sense of self. And what they did to philosophy, they took women out of it. They demonized it by making man the powerhouse of everything. And when they did that, they locked our brains out of both sides of expression. You should be able to express the deepest parts of your soul 24/7. If you have to express you're sad, you should be able to express your sad in the deepest sense of the sadness, not just, oh, I'm alive. What's triggering that expression of the self? There's something deeper where you need to get it out. Once you get it out, you're no longer bound by that loss of sense of self. There's wholeness to everything. The second we try to split all of this stuff apart, that the universe, the study of the universe is different from the study of the anatomy, which is different from the study of philosophy, which is different from the study of math, I'm gonna yabba dabba do this wall because it's all the same. It truly is all the same. The second we take one away from the other, we're locking ourselves out of this deeper understanding of creation. The more we understand the deepest parts of creation, the more we're bound by nothing, the more we're gonna fix the entirety of our existence here on this plane. But we lock one out, we're locking ourselves out of the full understanding of it all. You can. But once you understand, you is the powerhouse, you'll never give away that power, ever again. You're going to study it all. You're going to literally realize what Nikola Tesla was talking about. 369, 369, 369, all over the place. Unlimited possibilities for you to stumble upon whenever you're ready. And that's where maturity comes into play, which is awesome. You can't force somebody to grow up. You gotta grow up on their own time. When you try to force someone to do something based off of your ideas, of your understandings, you're gonna literally shotgun blast their kneecaps off. They're gonna be like, hey, what was that for? You're gonna be like, you had to go that way. And it's gonna be like, no, they didn't. They're here to govern themselves. And this is why we need self-governing systems, which is the first 10 years of the child's state of being is not supposed to be guided by some frictional state of a parent trying to force ideas on the child. Hey, you're going to go to college. You got to go be good in school. You got to do all of these things to my understanding and my level of understanding, or else you're a failure to me as a parent. What is that child going to do? They're going to shut down and lock out. And what are half of these kids done doing when they're running around before the age of 10? Shut down and locked out of their own brain because they're put in little simple boxes of understanding. That's terrible. That is not what we're supposed to do to the children. The children are the future. People are like, yeah, I'm going to go invest in the stock market and be rich. That's the most empty source of investment that you could do. What you can do if you have a kid, you make them little flashcards and you don't limit nothing on the flashcard. You're showing them the A, but what their subconscious mind is programming is the entirety of the whole flashcard. Everything that's surrounding the A, they're going to subconsciously go to understand on their own terms and conditions. You're not going to force it. So yes, you're guiding them to the A, B, C, D, but you're not forcing all of these externals. Now you're putting 1 + 1 = 2 on the same card. Their subconscious mind is going to program that. Now you're allowing them that ability to grow on their own time. And that's the same way that we teach them English. They hear us running around, babbling our mouths, and they just stumble upon their words eventually. And they say, Dad, or Mom. And then we go, oh my gosh. But we can't understand it past that. The subconscious mind is powerful. Your subconscious mind is powerful. You don't have to get it right away. Just introduce it. You don't have to force nothing in this universe. It's going to happen on its own time. Now what do we have? We have bugs that are 1,000 times the strength of the old bugs, and we're creating more and more chemicals to dilute these bugs, and we're making these chemicals so strong that it's destroying the factories that are creating the chemicals. Bro, if it's destroying the factories, creating the chemicals, what in the duck sauce is happening to those people in those small rural towns that are drinking the water with these pesticides? Bro, you go to a small town throughout Iowa, throughout Wisconsin, throughout any of these small places, you're going to see different breeds of human beings. Don't take that lightly. I'm talking Men in Black, the little cockroach Farmer John. I'm telling you, we got to stop all of this as soon as possible, and they're trying to drag it out to 2030. We cannot allow that. We're literally saying that we are cockroaches to the system. They're not killing the bugs no more. What are they truly stopping? Of course, I had a sensitive... Bro. I had a sensitive chord with somebody up in the office because Congress keeps telling me I ain't causing nothing but problems. And now they saying I'm in trouble with the government. I'm loving it. That was Eminem, my bad. Finally, out of these required rules must be categorized into the propositions and their primary divisions, namely the categorical, hypothetical, and categorical propositions, which asserts into a direct, unconditional relationship between a single subject and a single predicate. A hypothetical proposition conversely binds the multiple statements together and through the functioning logical connectives. Wow. By tracking these distinct structures through your custom 3D guides, the complete systematic whole of the logical truth is made to manifest. The student thus begins the detailed analysis of the categorical statements. We gotta stop thinking 1D. Oh, it's just me. We gotta stop thinking like that. We gotta start thinking about everybody. We gotta stop focusing so much on the self that we don't understand that the rules of manifestation are we wish it for the whole because we are one as a whole. It's all this whole experience, bro. I feel lucky. I feel lucky to be able to read and understand this stuff. Where before I would have just like, what? Let me cook through this, and then I'm gonna take a break, and then I'll be back on after I translate some more. And I slept all day, so I'll probably be up for a while, up all night. No, but I'll respectfully probably hit the 3 o'clock bell. Regarding these matters, the logician must pay strict attention in how the proposition derives from the true values, and not what is the declarative statement that cannot achieve the formal rectitude unless its composite parts completely are proportioned into the real properties of the things, just as the geometric line determines the boundary of the mathematical figure and as the logical term sets into the distinct conceptual limits within the intellect. If these boundaries are applied loosely or confused with the metaphorical truths, the entire syllogistic structures become corrupt in error and multiplies of its very source. What is it explaining? It's explaining the neuron pathways how you could have burnt synapses. What creates a burnt synapse is the loss of sense of respect for self. What is the loss of sense of respect for self? You go out to the club in Houston and you drink 15 shots back to back because they're $1 a shot. And you like, oh, this cheap. But you're not seeing the cause and effect. So what happens now is the brain is trying to still grow and grow and grow. What you did to the brain right there is you shot each and every synapse to be a burnt thought of expression of self. Now you're going to have these stutter phases where you're like, duh, 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 duh. Ay, 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 ay. You mean? So you have to respect the self in order for like the unlimited growth. And then if you ever confuse the unlimited growth with the limited sense of understanding, you are creating that concrete wall here through manifestation. And you could hold up to 2.3 petabytes of information. Do you understand how much information that is? Do you know how many books is 2.3 petabytes of information? Do you truly know how unlimited that is? And that's just them trying to find a limit to it all. Is it truly limited to that? I don't think so. As vast as the universe is as vast as your brain can grow because they're one and the same. You understand the outer, you understand the inner, you are unlimited. Blast off. Confused into the metaphorical tropes, the entire syllogistic structure becomes corrupt and error multiplies from its very source. You are the source. You are the power. Don't give it away. Furthermore, we must recognize that the deep distinction between the underlying substances of the entity and its accidental modifications of natural philosophy. As the ancient commentators demonstrate, a physical body is the composite of the matter of the form, the subject to the term of the change of the local motion. In logic, however, we isolate these proprieties, and through the abstract definitions, therefore, the mind must step cautiously when assigning properties. The subject separating from what belongs to the thing essentially and from what is merely the contingent circumstance or an accidental mode of temporal existence. Thus concludes the initial structure of the inquiry, the general composition of the declarative statement of the fundamental grouping of the categorical propositions. It follows now to treat the concerning strict definitions of the names themselves, outlining how a single term or the vocal sign refers into the real singular nature without introducing a false composition into the essence of the soul. This ends the 6th chapter. Chapter 7. I respond that the definition can be understood in twofold manner, namely as the definition of the name quid nominis, or the definition of the thing quid re. A definition of the name in which is simply to explain the meaning of a vocal or written sign, demonstrating what the term is to be, which signifies to a human mind without asserting whether the object exists into the actual realities. For instance, when we define a completely fictional entity like chimera, and we provide the definition of the name alone, since it lacks a true essence in the physical world. The Trinity in two people. Who are the Trinity? The Trinity is the white light within everybody. We had to give it to a person for somebody to understand the simplicity of it all, but then they started giving their power away to it. It was like, oh my gosh. All right. Yeah, you go and pray to those statues. You go and support all of these religions and give away all your power when you are the whatever, dude. I can't explain it any deeper than that because it's that simple. And then the second you say that you don't believe in the higher sense of self, you don't believe that you're unlimited, you don't believe in the most high sense of creation that created this earthly experience, you don't believe that you're a family to that sense of creation? All right. Well, you go ahead and you take your Eve gene out and you stomp on it and rip it apart and you shred it to pieces. And do we all know where the Eve gene comes from? It comes from the maternal side. The man is not the sense of this level of creation. We have to fix that understanding, or we're taking everything out of context. That's not okay. Man removed rib, made woman. No, no, no. Man gets rid of his own sense of the Eve gene in the procreation state. They have twisted everything. And by they, I mean lost souls. So don't blame them, but don't play a part in it. That's for darn sure. A definition of the thing, conversely, is what expresses the true intrinsic nature and the essential principles into the existing substance. And such when we state that a human being is a rational animal. That is true. We're all animals. One and the same. We could be just as lost as a horse running across the plains. But we could turn that animalistic state of thinking off by understanding that we don't have to be stuck in the animal state. We could be animals using 15% of our brain unhappy for forever. What good does that do us to be yes men, yes women? It don't do us no good. But what does do us good as a collective is helping people come to this conclusive understanding no matter the cost of the image of self. Does the image of self truly matter if this is just a character you're in? For the experience, you're going to be here to leave? And you think the character matters that much? All right, well, you just limited yourself to a simplistic understanding to fit in and stay in line. I mean, go ahead and march off the cliff, you little sheep. The type of the definition does not merely explain a word, but lays into the hylomorphic compensation of the subject. Whoa. I got some definitions to get to the bottom of. Wow. Combining its generic genius with its ultimate specific difference, the real definitions alone into the universal sciences derive their stable demonstrations of the construct of the eternal laws. Finally, out of these required rules, we must recognize the true, real definition cannot contain anything accidental or superfluous. It must descend rectilinearly and from the highest category down to the specific quiddity of the object, capturing the exact boundaries by matching your physical tract to the 3D guide paths, and these present logical steps. The complete systematic whole of the nominal predication is made evident. Thus begins the detailed analysis of the definitions of the species and the essential traits. If you don't understand the white matter, you will never create the sense of I matter. You'll be stuck in an abyss where you are trying to compare white matter to dark matter, and by saying that I don't understand the highest sense of matter is to be lost in the dark matter of the world. If you are to unlock the holistic state of thinking where white matter is the expression of self, and how vast white matter is not able to be stopped by nothing, they try to bury white matter. What happened? It popped back out. Scientists were mystified. They're like, how's it doing this, dude? We just buried it. That's the study of matter. This is where physics doesn't exist, because the metaphysical world destroys physics. And so physics gets destroyed. Now we have the double slit experiment, and people can't understand nothing no more because they're all loose off the goose when they're trying to understand this all. Because they're trying to just keep things tightly compared in a box. You can't. That's why, philosophically speaking, you are white matter. You are the highest sense of matter. You are what matters most. Don't let the dark matter take over. Don't compare your white matter to somebody else's dark matter. You won't understand it. It's saying take that conclusive understanding and get rid of it. Stop trying to compare yourself to somebody else. You'll never understand somebody else. When you're comparing yourself to them, you can't. Everybody's on their own journey in life. You can't force somebody to be down that journey that much faster. You can't force nothing. But what we need to stop doing is molding the youngins. They're the absolute expression of this white matter. That's why they're the happiest, go lucky, nothing truly could upset them until you show them that something's the matter. You're projecting your dark matter on their white matter when they're nothing but light. You can't do that. A child is not your crutch. A child is not your cigarette filter. If you want to go bare your bones into that sense of loss of sense of self, you do that on your own accord. But don't reflect that to your child. We got to quit limiting the children. A is for apple. A is for alpha. These are all of the different languages of the A. 1 + 1 = 2. Next. We give them these flashcards of unlimitedness, and where we know that they're not going to get it right away, their subconscious mind is going to be churning those cards. What are you feeding them? From the sense of knowledge, down to the sense of food, down to the sense of self. They are the future, more important than the stock market and your 401k. What are we investing into the future? Oh, I got a pretty hefty 401k. But what are you teaching the kids? That money matters more than the self? Or that they're unlimited? And we'll be back. We're on page 20 of 227. Oh, shoot. What a wholesome text this is. I have to say, I can't wait to finish this up because I'm getting new words by the massives. Have a good next 2 to 3 hours, potentially. I might be back soon. I want to get down to the bottom of these definitions. And I also want to go ahead and reread what I already read because I like to